Do the parents ever take their kids' money? So technically in the Amish, you're not considered an adult until you're 21 years old. And in my community, we were not allowed to keep our money from our jobs that we worked until we turned 21. Unless we got married, in which case you could get married at 18 or older, but then you would start with nothing. Most guys worked until they were a little bit older than 21 so they could save up just a little bit of money. My dad bought each of us boys a horse, a buggy, and a harness when we turned 19. And I left all that behind, obviously, when I left. I knew of one case where the father let his son keep his money when he turned 20, but then he had to buy all that stuff himself. But he still, made plenty more money, so he had more money than what it took to buy that. My grandpa told a story about his mom and dad when they got married. His mom was not old enough, or she wasn't 21 yet, so his dad actually had to live at his in-laws' house. And my grandfather's parents lived with, my grandfather's mother's parents for a good little while after they got married, just so that they could work off that debt, basically is what they considered it. So that's the way it used to be done in my community. I didn't know of anybody who got their own money until they turned 21, unless they got married. We were, however, allowed to, in my family, to work night jobs or side jobs and keep that money. So I would go and clean out horse stalls and haul it out with a wheelbarrow, and then put, there's 10 horse stalls I had to clean out every night along with 2 other buddies. And we made $30 a night. We put new fresh sawdust back in all of them. And it usually took us about 5 to 6 hours for that $30, but it was something. And even with the money I would spend on stuff I wasn't supposed to, I had roughly around $300 saved up when I left. I thought it was a lot of money, but it didn't last me very long. Hopefully this answers your question. Have a good day. Did you work in the nighttime? So my construction job that I worked, I get picked up first on the route, and I get picked up a few minutes after 6 o'clock in the morning. We had to make 6 other stops, and those guys weren't always ready, And by the time we got to work, it usually be 7:30 or 8, and then we'd leave work around 4:30, usually be home by like 5:30 or 6 in the evening. And around 6 in the evening, one night a week, I would go clean out horse stalls for this English lady that had a horse grooming or a horse boarding place. And it was kind of a job that a lot of the kids in the community or the neighborhood had. And when this one guy was going to quit, he was getting old enough to start keeping his own money from his job. So he didn't want to do that job anymore, so he offered it to me, and I accepted. And we would clean out 10 horse stalls, load it into wheelbarrows, and haul it about 100 yards out and dump it on a pile. And then we'd have 2 big gravity wagons full of sawdust that we had to shovel back into these 10 horse stalls. And usually we worked for about 5.5 hours. 5 on a good night, but sometimes it took a little bit longer. And you'd get home about 11:30, just sweaty, tired, but you had a check for $30, and that really meant a lot to me back then. And one night every other week we'd do a smaller barn, but on that one we could use a John Deere Gator, and that was always kind of fun. We'd put the manure in the back and haul it out and dump it, and that one was always a little more fun because you got to drive the Gator. We always took turns. My parents were kind enough to let me keep that money. Otherwise I wouldn't have done the extra work, obviously. And I also took a couple jobs, painted a roof for a guy in Fredericktown, and I just talked to the guy directly. I was probably 16 years old, and worked up a price and went and painted it for him, and did a couple other projects like that. So yeah, any work that I did on the side, my dad would usually allow me to keep the money. The one time I did a side job, I did a roof, and he asked me, where the money was, and I said, you were never there, I was the one who showed up and did the work. I took the job. You're not going to see that money. And he left it at that. No kid pays bills until 18, and no decent parent going to take a working child's money. So first off, when I said bills, I meant we didn't have any expenses. Our parents bought everything and supplied everything for us. Food, clothes, transportation, medical bills that needed paid were paid for. We had everything we needed. So there's a lot of English kids or non-Amish kids who might not have bills, but they pay for gas money, they pay for insurance on their car, for a cell phone. They always have bills, expenses. I looked at it as doing my part. I didn't mind it. Yeah, it would have been nice to have some money, but I really didn't need it for anything. The only thing I would have bought with that money would have been beer or cigarettes or something that I wasn't supposed to have. Secondly, I started out at 14 making $4 an hour working in a furniture shop. And then I started working construction for $5 an hour. So it was never even that much money. It was more about learning a trade while my parents supported me and gave me everything I needed while I learned my trade. And third, my parents were amazing parents. I hope you had decent parents, because my parents were amazing. We might not have always seen eye to eye, but they always wanted what was best for me, and they cared. Yes, I don't agree with this comment at all, because even if at the time I might have wanted to keep some of that money or to have some spending money, there was nothing that I really needed it for. And I learned that there is a big difference between needing something and wanting something. So to recap, I've seen a lot of non-Amish kids working at a job that is not a career for them. It's just something to do until they turn 18 or graduate. And they have to pay for their car in some cases, car insurance. A lot of times, they're struggling. I didn't struggle at all. I had an easy life. Everything was, handed to me that I needed. And some of the things I wanted, I had to go out and work for, a little bit of extra work. But I learned a trade, and that's something that I'm very thankful for. And I will forever be grateful for my parents and for the way that they raised me, even though I decided to leave. I'm thankful that they tried to do the right thing and that they cared and loved me. And by the way, here's a sunset for you guys. Hope you have a nice day. How did your parents know how much you earned? Actually, usually I didn't even know how much I earned, and my parents did, because they would get the check directly. And some of my jobs, I did bring the check home and give it to my parents, but it was not made out to me and I was not able to cash it. Your wages were something that was negotiated between your boss and your parents, not you and your boss if you were a minor. Hopefully that answers your question. Have a good day. Joanne says, that sucks. You earned the money. And I've gotten quite a few other comments like that. People just don't understand. What you have to understand is we were a family. It was all for one and one for all. There was no concept of individuals or of being an individual, We were there to help the family survive. And I never looked at it as really that bad that they were keeping my money. Yeah, I would have liked to have it, but I had nothing I really had to buy with it. My parents paid for my clothes. I didn't have to pay rent. I didn't have to buy food. If I wanted something for hunting or something like that, my parents would buy it for me if I could convince them that I really needed it, And my dad bought me a horse and a buggy and a harness when I turned 19. So if you think about it, they never earned enough money from me to pay for everything that, they paid for of mine throughout the years. And sure, they got to keep that horse and buggy and harness because I left the Amish, but had I not, I would have gotten to keep it. So I think people are just looking at it all wrong. Like when my older brother got married, he was like 25, so he had at least 4 years of saving up money, but he didn't have a house, so he stayed at our house. Him and his wife stayed in his room for the first couple months of their marriage. And that's pretty common, for families to help, their kids out. And then when he needed, to get a loan, my parents co-signed and, helped him buy a house. And the other side of that coin is that after he was 21 years old, he lived there for another 4 years or so. and he didn't pay rent, and he didn't buy food, you know. So really, you know, it's not such a horrible thing. Some ex-Amish people might find it, you know, horrible, and they might think that it was bad. You know, yeah, I left the Amish with little money, but looking back, you know, I had everything I ever needed, and I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for everything that my parents gave me, and yeah, I don't hold it against them. I know if I had gotten that money, I would have just went out and spent it on silly stuff that I didn't need, you know, like beer and cigarettes. And I wouldn't have it today anyway, so it really doesn't matter. In the grand scheme of things, you know, I think I had a pretty good life. And I think it was a pretty fair trade, you know. God bless you, everybody.